Hello everyone, it's Vince Singing again, and welcome to another edition of Classic Posture Critiques. Today we're going to be covering a story that I remember enjoying when I first heard it, and it also helped point me in the direction of what is now my favorite, or one of my favorite artists. I think his name, I pronounce his name correctly, Osamu Sato. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's one of those names where I never heard it out loud. For those who aren't familiar with his works, he is the gentleman behind LSD Dream Emulator, and you've probably seen a ton of Let's Plays where people talking about how weird and insane it is. And I honestly think like it's a surreal game in and of itself, and I would actually encourage people to play just for it. If you want to go in for like something that's like kind of pulse pounding, if you want to go in for something that kind of isn't that kind of inspired games like Umi Nikki. I'm not saying that declaratively. I'm saying that it are in kind of in the same vein as this kind of weird open world exploration, kind of oddly symbolic thing, where you know it's up to you. What you see is very much up to your interpretation. Then I would recommend that game, and I think you can find it's for the PS1, and I think it's incredibly rare. But I think you can find like someone who made a PC port by scratch, and I think you can find it online for free. It's an experience, man, and the soundtrack is fucking phenomenal. Osamu Sato is one of my favorite music artists, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about his work outside of LSD Dream Emulator. I think, or the Eastern Mind, I think, is another game that he made. But besides all that, this is the Gray Man, and I don't think there's a credit here. Let's see. Unfortunately, not. So let's get right into it. Yeah, I forgot to mention E3 just came around, and Ryan Reynolds showed a shitty fucking cringy movie. There we go. I know it was happening, and I thought like let me do a video game creepypasta in a spirit of being disappointed, crushingly disappointed by mediocrity and cringe this year by E3. I mean, disappointment is a strong word. It also implies that I had any expectations going in. I kind of went into that knowing that it would be like a cringe fest of obnoxious and intrusive celebrity cameos and games that don't even look all that interesting. All that fucking Tiny Tina Wonderland game. All that looks so shit. But again, let's get back on track. Let's get on track, period. We weren't even on track. Let's get on track, period. When I was 17, my best friend Mike kept a YouTube channel for Let's Play. He was a fan of old and not so well known games, most of which he played on a PXX emulator on his laptop. The channel wasn't particularly popular. He had about 30 subscribers, most of which were just his friends. Hey, don't knock it, buddy. I used to watch his videos for a few minutes when I got in from school to raise his views and help him out. He wasn't entertaining as any game commentator, I guess, but some channels just don't let off. Tell me about it. We took the same chemistry class and sat next to each other in it every morning at school. One day he asked me if I heard of a game called LSD Dream Emulator. I hadn't. He concluded that if I hadn't heard of it, it was definitely obscure enough for his channel. Well, that one because one person didn't hear about this game, that's what made you decide that it was obscure enough to play? It's kind of weird. Like, I think if you go into and anyone and ask them, like, oh, what is this guy like? Someone with an encyclopedic knowledge of games, where like this is my litmus test for the rarity of this game. Where if he doesn't know it, then it's hands down one of the rarest games I have. He had uploaded some videos of it that night. It was a very peculiar game. The objective seemed to be only to walk around various Japanese environments, colliding with things that transported the player to other environments. Various animals and people glided through the game, usually taking no notice of the player, although there was one NPC known as the Gray Man. Okay, I don't want to... I feel like a fucking dork for cutting in to point this out. I just find it kind of weird that the core mechanic of the game is just kind of just brushed off for this one teeny tiny minor aspect of the game that really, if you play it, you have a not that even high a chance to run into. I'm not even saying that, like, I'm not saying that he has to explain everything word for word, but it kind of feels like I think this person has seen gameplay footage of the LSD Dream emulator, but I kind of hope that he had more to say about it than this. It's like, okay, you're transported into, you touched and the walls, and you got transported into other environments. But let me tell you about this NPC. Like, that is that is like the most mundane description of a weird ass game like that as possible. Like the weird symbolism, the colors, the bizarre geometries that game has, and to be honest with you, the Gray Man isn't even the scariest NPC you find in that game. No, that's a giant fucking baby that headbutts you, or the giant fucking Minotaur thing that comes over the gate. Like all these weird shit. I guess the Gray Man would be pretty unnerving in an environment like that where everything seems so mundane, and yet this one NPC seems to be the closest thing to a normal character, and he does have an actual effect on you if he actually comes into contact with you, which is unique to him, and I think one other NPC that if it touches you, it sends you to a specific area. I could be misremembering the last part, though. He was, as the name would suggest, a gray man in a hat and coat. He tended to appear without warning and slide sullenly towards the player. What do you mean sullenly? He just slid... What do you mean by... Okay, hold on. Let me just... It sounds pathetic, but I'm gonna look up the word sullenly. Sullenly is defined as something done in a grim or sulky manner. Like, he didn't sullenly glide towards you. He just it was a still image. He just glided towards you. Like, I don't know. I'm getting really pedantic about it. If the player got too close, the screen would flash white and he would disappear. Each time this would happen, Mike would gasp and then nervously laugh it off and continue playing. The gameplay was divided into days. Each day only lasted a few minutes, after which the player would be taken back to the menu, which prompted a new dream. Mike played up to day 12 over the course of a week, and clearly enjoyed the game, as it was apparent in his videos. He seemed immersed in it, almost captivated. However, one night, he posted a bulletin on his YouTube channel saying, "You know it's time to stop when the Gray Man pops up in your real dream." I guess, frowny face. What should I play next? I wasn't fazed by this casual joke, and he told me in chemistry following the morning that he was mainly stopping because he wanted to play something new. I'd recommended something, but the exam was nearing and I wanted to concentrate on my work. I suggested he took a short break from YouTube and do the same. He agreed that it was a good idea, and we arranged to meet at his house at that evening to revise. Saddled with several chemistry textbooks, I walked through town that evening to his house. The lights were on, but there was no reply when I knocked. Out of politeness, I waited a minute before I knocked again. This time it was opened instantly. Mike stood at the doorway, his hair wet, looking extremely shaken. Without a word, he led me to his room, where various papers and books were spread across his desk. He seemed surprised to see them. After a few minutes of pretending to read while actually curious, as to why he was so anxious and jumpy, I finally said, "What's wrong?" To which he mumbled something incomprehensible in response. My efforts continued until he finally confided in me. He said about 10 minutes before I arrived, he had fallen asleep in the bath and had a dream. He said in his dream he was drowning under the water, completely paralyzed and unable to lift his head for air. The quivering silhouette of the Gray Man towered over the water, watching him. I sympathized that this may have caused a few seconds of distress before he woke up, but I could not understand why he was still petrified. I tried to comfort him, but he sensed that I didn't understand. He grabbed my shoulders and screamed at me. It lasted for weeks. 10 minutes I was asleep. I was choking underwater for weeks, and I wouldn't die. Mike grew increasingly distant after that. We exchanged no words in our chemistry lessons, and he began to look extremely unwell. His eyes became pink and shrunken into his head, surrounded by purple rings. Over a week, his neat writing deteriorated into a careless scrawl, until he stopped writing completely and instead spent the duration of the lessons with his head buried in his hands. Occasionally, he would accidentally fall asleep in this position and wake up several minutes later shrieking furiously and pounding the table with his fist. After 2 incidents of this, he was removed from the lessons and taken to be educated in private. But after his refusal to sleep made him too tired to be angry, he returned to his normal lessons and sat through them, completely motionless. I found new friends, and he existed as a shell of a human being. It was around this time that a brand new graffiti began to appear frequently around the town on walls and such, resembling a Japanese word or phrase. I can't read that. I'm assuming it says gray man in Japanese or something. Oh, why not? I got access to the high-tech Google device. Let me just use my, using Google Translate. Violent Street. Okay. The placement and the color of the paintings vary greatly. I didn't think much of it at the time. New artistic vandals were always trying to get themselves reputations this way. Artistic weeaboo vandals, yes. However, one night I was walking home from a party with half a bottle of vodka and noticed the moonlight glowing on fluorescent red. The moonlight glowing on the fluorescent red of fresh paint down a thin alley to my left. I walked down it and found a half-finished piece of graffiti above Mike, who was slumped over on the ground, weeping, with a can of spray paint rolling out of his hand. I sighed and sat next to him and offered him a drink of my vodka. He drank a very large amount and handed the bottle back to me, wheezing. His eyes were closed. I don't think he knew where he was. I can't. What? I go to sleep. I wake up in another version of where I was. It's exactly the same, but he's there, torturing me. What does that mean, Mike? I indicated the Japanese symbols above him, but all I did was hang his head lower. The pain doesn't stop when I wake up. He didn't speak again for half an hour, and I eventually persuaded him to go home. He stood up and stumbled into the night. I found a completed piece of graffiti on the next sheet and took a picture of it with my phone, then went home myself. The next day, I googled lists of Japanese symbols and matched the letters with the alphabet and the image on my phone in order to get the type of symbols I would search for. This took a good while, as the Japanese alphabet is extensive, and to me, the symbols look very similar. Look, can we just stop Asian hate, you fucker? All their alphabet looks the same, huh? I tell them to go back to the rice fields next, you bastard. I can't believe it. I was going to say 2021, but I don't know when this story came out. It's in the 2000s period. I thought we were past this. After I finished finding the symbols, I entered them into Google, and it turned out to be the name of the Violence District. A legion in the LSD game consisted of dark streets littered with graffiti and corpses lying on the ground, hanging by a neck in a lamppost or headless. I'd seen Mike encounter this area many times in his videos. I woke up in the middle of the night to find Mike standing in the corner of my room. I give kudos to the fucking the dude who wrote the story, because like waking up and see like you're someone who's been like after everything we read about Mike falling apart and waking up to find him standing in your fucking room in the corner of it, like that actually kind of gave me a chill for a second. Like I had to like process like, oh wait, I actually felt something reading one of these stories. Wow. A hood hiding the stone dead face as I had grown to associate him with. His laptop was under his arm, and he placed it to my bed, telling me to delete the game, delete the videos, and delete the YouTube account. I asked why he could, and he replied, I don't want to touch him. Before climbing out the window he had entered through. I was too bewildered to go back to sleep. I opened his laptop and did as he said, deleted all the videos from the documents, and canceled his YouTube account, which was signed in automatically. Then I noticed the file, pxxfin.exe on his laptop. I double-clicked to run the PlayStation 1 emulator and opened LSD Dream Emulator CD image on it. While loading onto his file, which is still on day 12, Mike was clearly unstable, I figured. Many people play this game and have been unharmed. I could easily do the same. I continued where Mike left off and wandered aimlessly through the dream worlds that he had done. The game was very strange. I remember from the videos, perhaps even a little unsettling. From the videos, perhaps even a little unsettling, but after I shut off the laptop, my state of mind was completely normal. The one thing that confused me somewhat as I played another 6 days of the game, and not encounter the Gray Man at all. So, the one thing that had confused me somewhat was that I had played another 6 days of the game and not encountered the Gray Man at all. Regardless, I drifted off to sleep. I dreamed that night. I was on a brown mountain, and I had seen that game. Against a dark gray sky with thick fog, nearby was a poorly rendered figure facing away from me. It was difficult to tell through the fog with simple graphics, but it appeared to be wearing a green parka and jeans, like Mike. I was unable to move, and it slowly glided towards me, though facing away from me. Finally, it turned around, and I saw a still image of Mike's smiling face plastered across a sphere on the figure's head before I woke up. Mike wasn't at school the next day, or the day after, or the day after that. I started my own file, LSG Dream Emulator, and I continuously seen the Gray Man, concluding that it was no issue with the copy of the game, yet he never appeared on Mike's file. I frequently searched the internet and asked the fans why the Gray Man would stop appearing, each of them insisting that this wouldn't happen, and that at that point, the player should expect to meet the Gray Man at least once per dream. The police knocked on my door that weekend, asking if I knew anything about Mike's whereabouts, or if I knew there's anything that had been troubling him. I calmly replied that we don't talk much anymore, putting this whole situation out of my mind. I started thinking about my future and concentrated on getting a good chemistry grade. A couple weeks later, they found him in the woods miles out of town. Forensics concluded that he had bludgeoned himself to death with a rock very soon after the day he went missing. I dream about him sometimes. Okay, I don't remember. This is a different Gray Man story than I remember hearing. Like okay, let me look it up right now. And I feel the Gray Man creepypasta. What? Is that the same thing? No, what the fuck is this? Like, there are two Gray Men, but one of them is spelled with an A, and this one's much longer. What the hell's happening? I don't understand. I distinctly remember, like the story, like having some weird thing, LSD Dream Emulator. No, that's not LCD. Gray Man creepypasta. Okay. I remember it being so much different. What was it? I don't know, like, I don't know what's happening. Like, I remember this creepypasta being a lot more needlessly violent at the end. Like, it was some weird thing where it's like, oh, I went to the guy who I emailed him and asked him what it was, and like there was like images in the files where it was like dead bodies and shit, and like, oh, it was like a snuff film. It was so horrifying. I honestly think this is a revised version. Hold on, maybe not. No, because it's like 2014. So I think the version I heard that on Mr. Creepypasta's channel, so that might have been like a version someone else wrote. It's kind of weird, but yeah, this was like I'm going into like a whole tangent here, and it feels weird because I went into this expecting a certain ending and expecting to have to comment on that ending, and it was not there at all. And instead, I get something that was what I would have suggested if it was the story I remembered, which is like have something creepy, weird, ominous, and ambiguous. This is a good story. This is a genuinely good story. Although, I guess I do have some comments to say about it. I think that a little bit more could have been done with Michael to kind of establish him as a character. I think there should have been a few more instances of them talking to each other, and maybe show some things where he's talking about the game behind the scenes off of his channel to the main character, to the narrator. I think that would, like, not too many, like one or two more segments, like, so we have it in our mind that the kind of personality he has, and So when we see him like basically fall apart from him, it becomes all the more unnerving to see how hard he kind of fell from it. Uh, I think a few more details. I don't know because a few more. I would like a few more details about the game itself. Like I know about LSD Dream Emulator because I played it a little bit of it. At least a fan game. I've looked up information about it. I have the Dream Journal, I think, or not physically, but I downloaded the Dream Journal and I was looking through it. Like there's all these details about it that I'm perfectly aware of, and like I'm waiting for certain details to be like divulged. Like they bring up the Violence District, which actually is a part in the game, and I don't think that's it sounds like some kind of cheesy like generic creepypasta thing where it's like all these dead bodies and shit like that. No, the Violence District in that game actually is like that. It would have been to the game's benefit or the story's benefit to actually include maybe screenshots or gifs from the game, like the image of the Gray Man. I think is not an inherently terrifying image, but I think it would have benefited this story if we had seen like an image of the Gray Man in the game, just opposed to the kind of colorful landscapes that you find yourself in the game. Like, and that kind of like also surmises the kind of weird enigmatic presence that he has in the game, where he doesn't seem to fit in any environment he's in, except for maybe the violent. Like I think again the Violence District. Like I think an image of him like in like I guess in that like kind of Toyland area. I think that would have like done a good job in kind of immediately putting an image in people's mind to know what to how to feel when they see him or when he's described. The ending is kind of odd. I think it's odd to me because of I guess it being framed from Mike is in like almost like a video game realm, and he's seeing his friend almost in that kind of style, like he's trapped in a video game and he's seeing his friend as an NPC. I think I don't think the presence of the game itself as an aspect of the story was present enough for that to really resonate with me. Again, like the video game aspect wasn't in this enough and wasn't like really expanded upon enough to really make it all the more chilling when he kind of gets teleported into that kind of, or he has a dream where he's like in that game itself. Like I think a few images and a little bit more descriptions of the game and how it functions, or maybe even a segment where like the moment where he and Mike talk about the game, like where Mike introduces like, hey, have you heard of this game? And you could have a little bit of a moment, like an one-off moment where Mike is basically describing how it plays and how it affects, how the game basically functions from what he's played so far, and like how he feels about it. Like, oh, it's pretty interesting. Like, yeah, I'm thinking about playing it for my channel. Like, oh, okay, like, cool. Like, oh man, it's gonna blow your mind. Just wait until you see it on the channel. Maybe like a bit of a playful, like it's very subtle but playful dialogue where it's like, oh well, can I come over and like watch you play? Like, no, man, you gotta get my view count up, man. You gotta go and watch. You gotta wait until like you gotta wait for the next video to come out like everybody else. Like something to slight moment to kind of endear us to Mike. Because like there's no, like I want to make it clear, like I don't have any problem with Mike as a character at all. I just think that a few more cursed details about him would have made us easier to connect to, and thus when we see how this Gray Man as an entity kind of makes him unravel mentally, it makes it all the more chilling. Like Marble Hornets, where a fair amount of the beginning of that series was the setup, explaining the Alex and all the characters and who they were as people, the kind of mental state that a lot of them kind of had, and we see that breaking point for a lot of them at many points in the series, and it's all the more chilling because we saw how they started out as. I really want to know where I heard, because I swear I'm not even kidding. Like, it was some weird shit where I was listening to the story, and this was years ago when I was starting to get into creepypasta. Like, oh my god, it's been almost, oh Jesus Christ, I'm old. I think it was like 2014, and it was like a version of the story that was, I think I heard it on a Mr. Creepypasta's channel, and it was like some shit where it was like there was like going into the game's files, and there was like images of like torture and child pornography or some shit like that. Like, that was in the story I heard. I don't know what happened to it. Who took that shitty ending and replaced it with this kind of creepy one? I also like the last line at the end. Like, I dream about him sometimes. Like, it's like, you know, when it comes to a lot of creepypasta, a fair amount of people try to have a stinger that really, like, that kind of punches you in the gut a little bit. Sometimes the best one, the stinger that you can put out there, are ones that just kind of make you raise your brow. And that's what it like, huh? Like, he was haunted by the gray man in his dreams, and all of a sudden, now he's now he's dreaming about his friend Alex in his dreams. He doesn't mention that, you know, I keep seeing him as an NPC in the game world anymore. But, you know, as a single line out there, just like out there in his own little thing, and you're left to really think about it. I do like I think I find it chilling, the idea of I guess, like, falling asleep in a bathtub and waking up. Like, for someone else, like, oh, well, you fell asleep for a little bit. Like, I was in there for a week and I didn't drown. What the fuck? Like, I was in there asleep for a week. Like, that is a creepy. That's an unnerving thought. If only because, like, the idea of, like, I don't know. I know there are people that can fall asleep in the bathtub. I dread even thinking about doing something like that, because you never know, maybe you might drown or some shit. But again, going on a lot of tangents. This story was very good. I'm actually really glad I read this. I want to know what happened to the original one. If anyone knows about the version that I'm talking about, please let me know. Cause I feel like I'm a crazy person here, because I remember it like being in a certain way, and now it's completely another way. I really would like to know what the fuck I had played all that time ago. So yeah, this was very enjoyable. I'm happy to have read this. If you guys like this video, smash the like button or whatever stupid shit, just generic fucking phrases that I'm supposed to say as a person who makes videos on the internet. And subscribe, and tell me what you thought about the story down below. And if you have any suggestions for stories that you would like me to cover at some other point. Again, classic creepypasta. You have to also differentiate what kind of creepypasta it is. If it's a creepypasta with some level of notoriety, then you're like, hey, for classic pasta critiques, I think you should cover this. Or for you know, for any just random thing. I don't read joke stories. I want to make that very clear here right now. I don't like reading joke stories on the channel. This is a very serious-minded channel. God damn it! This is for this is for intellectuals only. Got to be able to play 4D chess to fucking be a subscriber of mine. Dang it! Oh yeah. So y'all have a good one. I'm gonna go get a I don't know, that talk of vodka made me want to get a shot of vodka, so I'm gonna do that now. Y'all have a good one.